So we're here at the Flow Hive office, and today we're going to take a look at starting your hive with foundationless frames. Now that's what we offer with our Flow Hives, is foundationless frames, and you'll see what I mean when we get into the beehive here. This little hive we caught as a swarm just a couple of weeks ago. So what we're going to do is do a brood inspection and have a look at how they're going, drawing their naturally drawn comb off those foundationless frames. So I've already given the hive a little bit of smoke. I might just put my bee suit on. Do remember, some people have severe allergic reactions to bees. Do think about that as you're working your hive. We've got links on our website for safety information on that. So I'm just popping the lid off, and the inner covers come with it. That's okay. And we're looking into the hive here now, and you can see the girls are starting to really populate these frames, but they're not completely drawn out yet. Now I'm going to start with one of these edge frames. You basically have a look in and see where's an appropriate spot to start. Now I can see here that there's no comb connecting onto the wall, so I'll start by just moving this frame over a little bit and gently pulling it out. Sometimes if you've got a lot of bees, you might like to add a little bit of smoke to the end bars to move the bees away, so you're less likely to squash any as you pull that frame out. Now, naturally drawn comb with foundationless frames is a little bit less work because you don't have to do that waxing and wiring or of conventional frames, but it's a little bit more work in the inspection stage because you just want to check that they're building nicely on the guide. And also another thing to note about it is the comb's quite fragile. So in conventional beekeeping, you can just tip the frame anyway if it's got those wires inside. But this one, you don't want to do that, or that beautiful comb they're hanging when it's nice and fresh will fall right out. As they establish that comb and connect it to the sides and the base, then you can tip it around. But right now you've got to be very delicate. You can see this frame here has some nice pollen in the middle. You can see those colours as orange and white and greys of different pollens they're pulling in, and you can see some bees with pollen in their pollen baskets, and you can't see any brood on this frame. There's a little bit of a waggle going on here. If you see this bee just where my thumb is, you can see it waggling. That's pretty cool. That's looks like a grooming waggle because it's not doing a figure of 8 or a circle pattern with it. That's just saying, hey, I need a little something, and look, another bee's just come to take some nectar from it by the look of it. So that communication was, hey, I need to pass on some nectar to you, and looks like it's headed off, but it's still saying something. I'm yet to fully understand every piece of language in the hive, but it's so fascinating to learn more each time you open your hive and look in. So that's a nice example of naturally drawn comb. You can see here they've just started from this stick that we supply with our frames. Of course you can use foundation if you like, or plastic foundation or wax and wire foundation. The frames will accommodate those two as well, but my preference is to go with naturally drawn because the bees just get to do their perfectly natural thing and size the cells to raise their young, which I believe has a health benefit for the bees. The thing that's a little bit more tricky is sometimes they will go cross comb, and I'm just going to drop that back in here nice and gently, and let's just have a look through these frames and see if we can find any cross combing. Typically there'll be a little bit towards the edges of your hive. So I'm just gently bringing up that next frame, and already I can see some nice brood on this frame. If I if I turn this around, so the brood there is that the capping that has, what would you say, a less opaque compared to the honey. So I can't see any honey on this one apart from nectar glistening in the corners. So all of those capped cells, and there's the queen right there where my thumb is. So have a look at that. She's normally got the no stripes on her bottom, and she's just running around into that corner now. She often wants to escape. She gets a little camera shy. So if I go around to this side, I should see her popping out in this corner. Where is she? There, just at the end of my finger there. You can see the queen. Now, she does an amazing job of laying up to a couple of thousand eggs a day, and she's a bit bigger and a bit longer. She's so heavy actually when she's in that mode that she can't even fly. So if she does decide to leave the hive for a swarm, or rather the hive decides to swarm, then they'll actually have to starve her in order to get her lightweight enough to fly. It's fascinating looking into this world of bees. So there she is running along this top edge now. She has a different walking motion. She's got bigger legs and she tends to strut a little bit. So that's often the way you notice her, is by her movement, because most of her body looks the same as a worker bee except for the longer abdomen and the slightly bigger legs. And there she is there again, walking around on the comb surface. I'm just going to clear some bees away. She's noticed me. She's moving a bit quicker now. But there she is there.
Cedar, Vanessa would like to know, where are your gloves?
Okay, fantastic, good question. When you've got a nice calm hive like this and you're experienced, then you tend to not use gloves so much. However, if you don't want any stings, then do use your gloves. And of course, that doesn't mean that you won't get stings, it just lessens the chances. And as you get more experience, you can make that decision. I've got plenty of hives where I do use gloves because their temperament is such that you get so many stings without using them. So if you've got questions, put them in the comments below. We're here each week to answer your questions. Also let us know what you would like us to cover in topics next week. Today, if you're just tuning in, we're covering naturally drawn comb from foundationless frames. So that's the way we recommend people start, although you'll often get advice from beekeepers to do it in more conventional ways, which I used to do with waxing and wiring and plastic foundation, but this is the way I prefer to do it. I believe that the bees have a benefit in sizing the cells for themselves, and you also don't need to put wax into your hive from other beehives, which can be a risk, I guess. There is a little bit of a risk putting wax from other beehives into your hive from foundation suppliers. So this beautiful thing, they've made all this wax themselves. It's completely their own, and it's perfectly natural in the brood nest. So here we have brood again. So this was a swarm we caught a couple of weeks ago. They've started laying straight away. The 11 days in, you see the capping of the brood after the queen has laid. So we're seeing a lot of that, which is a beautiful thing. This beehive is off and away. So we'll keep going through the hive to see if there's any comb that we need to straighten up. So far, so good. It's not always this good. Sometimes you end up with a total cross-combing situation where the bees are just going crossways for whatever reason, and then it takes some effort to sort that out. And we'll cover that in another video, and we have looked at that before. But it's more brood here. A little bit of nectar around the edge, you can see. But and there's a few empty cells in the middle of the brood where you've got mixture of nectar pollen. It looks, what's probably happened here is they're expanded their brood nest. There's some grubs down here. The larvae stage sometimes gets called grubs, just where my thumb is. You can see a white grub down the bottom of each cell, which is the bee in its larvae stage. It spends about 11 days in that stage, starting from an egg, and then finally they cap it off in about another 11 days before they hatch out as a fluffy baby bee, ready to learn about the chores of the hive, and then eventually foraging and nectar collection in its short 1 month foraging life. So
Shelley is asking, can you extract royal honey from these hives?
So Shelley's asking about royal jelly. Now, I actually haven't done any royal jelly collection. If somebody can find the answer about how you collect it, then please put it in the comments below for those that are interested in collecting royal jelly. Royal jelly is basically what they feed to the bees in the first few days of their life, and if they decide to turn a normal worker bee into a queen bee, they continue to feed it royal jelly throughout its 11 days of larvae stage. Actually, the timing changes a little bit when it's a queen, but if they continue to feed royal jelly, then that bee will turn into a queen bee. So it's full of amazing things that actually stimulate a normal worker bee to transform into a queen. So quite extraordinary stuff, and there's beliefs about the health benefits of eating royal jelly. We might start from the other side here. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and we'll keep answering them. Also let us know what you'd like to see next week. We'll have a video on moving beehives coming up. We covered that recently, but the long range move, we'll do a short distance move soon. So here's one that's right on the edge of the hive, and you can see here how they're building. It's not too bad, but see how they're not really on the comb guide. If we have a look around this side, they actually haven't attached to the middle, they've attached to the edge. So what I might do is show you how to move that back onto the guide. Now, sometimes you knock it off. In fact, that one probably will just come off. But if you, let's say you had a comb that was attached onto the guide, but at one end they came off it, with your hive tool you could just push it over a bit and then they would reconnect it back to be nice in line. If I push this over, I think it will just drop off, which is another valid thing to do. If you want to, just drop that comb off and give them another go at starting in the center. That could be a good thing to do. Now this next comb looks like it's got a little bit of an issue too. I might just put that one down to give us space to work. If I come across here, in between here, I can already see the comb is connected together. So right in between these frames, the bees have connected the comb together, and I'll just add a little bit of smoke so the bee's clear and you can see what I mean there. So just gentle smoke. I'm not giving big puffs, just a little bit of smoke, and you can see what's happening is the comb that started on this one is cross-combing onto this frame. Now that's obviously not ideal because it makes the frames you can't service them anymore, you can't pull them out because they're connected to the other side. So what I'm going to do is cut that off on this side here and try and push it across. So actually I can see it's more than that, so it looks like this is worth just cutting straight down here. So what I'm doing is just pushing in here with my hive tool and breaking that honeycomb, trying not to break it all. It's a bit of a delicate operation this, when the comb is so fresh, and I'm just trying to cut those two apart It looks quite long as it goes down into the all the way down. So what's happened there now, if I pull out this frame, as you can see, I've just sliced that one off where they took off on a bit of a tangent across to the other frame. So that will hopefully help them rebuild and keep going on this line, which they're doing also. Look at that beautiful fresh nectar coming in. Now that's a real treat to taste because it's so floral and so full of flower nectar. You can see a bee here just having a little lick on that drop that's landed down there. It's, the bees are amazing at cleaning up spills in the hive. You can see quite a bit of honey just from doing that has spilt into the bottom of the hive, where because if I had this in the upper position, the bees could lick that up, but I'm going to have to manually remove that now so that the bees don't come and rob that nectar. I could probably push a little bit more here to try and get the bees back on their guide. You can see on this side how it started off nice, started off now, and now it's sort of curved off that wooden guide. So what I'm going to do is just dig my hive tool into the top here, brushing away any bees, and push it over. Just give it a little bit of a nudge, push it across. That way you can see the whole comb just shifting over a little bit, and then hopefully the bees will keep going in a straight line now. So that's what I mean by a little bit more work on the natural foundation, tidying them up a little bit. Of course, once they've drawn out straight enough, then the bees have got it from there on. And if you're putting a fresh frame into a hive, then if you put it between two straight ones, you get a nice straight, naturally drawn comb coming down in between those two frames. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below. We'll keep answering.
Brenda's asking, do you rotate the frames or put them back in the same way?
So I think it's best to keep the brood nest in the way it is. So I have run into problems in the past before where I have moved things around and I've put brood frames close together and the bees haven't actually been able to get in between those two frames, and then the beetles have taken advantage of that and taken over that hive. So if you can respect the brood pattern that's there, then that's great. If you can't, because there's another reason why you need to move things around, then take a good look, make sure there's space for the bees to service every comb. So put them back in the same order if you can. Keep the questions coming.
Leah's wondering if without foundation, does it take a lot longer for production?
Okay, so if you put foundation in, will the bees fill up quicker? My experience is if you put plastic foundation in, it'll be slower. They really don't tend to like it. When I say plastic foundation, it's a comb like this. They tend to take a long time to take to that, and that's why this frame's got a lot of beeswax rubbed on it to try and increase that. But I've had frames in my hive for years actually that they still haven't built out on the edge because their choice is to focus on the other frames. But that's my experience. My preference would be naturally drawn. They do a pretty good job. This has only been a few weeks. They've almost drawn out all those frames. So I don't think it slows down production a great deal. However, it does take 7 kilograms of honey to create a kilogram of wax. So there is more nectar that gets used if they do have to create their own foundation sheet. However, they create it in a very thin layer, so it's quite a thin foundation that the bees make themselves. So I don't think it slows down production really. Yep.
Kyle's asking, what's the chances of a wild swarm being attracted to an empty hive?
Okay, what you're talking about there is catching swarms. Now, we will cover a video on that, but you can make what's called a bait hive. Now, a bait hive is basically, they like something about a bee box deep in size. The stats show a 10 frame deep is about the perfect measurements for a colony. So then you can put them 6 to 12 feet off the ground in all 4 directions from an apiary. Now if you do that, the chances are in swarm time in spring, you have a pretty good chance of catching a swarm in that bait hive. There's little tricks like putting lemongrass oil in there, or Swarm Commander is a product that people sometimes use, but it's going to be far quicker for you to go and take a split from somebody or order a nucleus hive than wait for a swarm to get going. But it can be a bit of fun setting up some swarm traps, and you never know, you might score a nice colony of bees that move in. I've got 40 hives at my place. I set up a few swarm traps. I did get two hives out of that last season. So if you've got hives in a region, in an area, or you're close to a commercial operation, the chances are much higher of catching that.
Scott says before, oh, it's not opening, sorry. Lynn would like to know, what's your primary nectar flow right now?
Okay, so there's a new smell in the apiary, and it's a beautiful fragrant flower which I've forgotten the name of, and produces extremely floral nectar, and it's wafting through the apiary right now. Here we're still in springtime in the southern hemisphere, and there's been a whole lot flowering. We've had the macadamias flowering down here. We've had the ironbarks flowering on the ridge, although they're just about finished up there. They're a really nice flower and a beautiful, one of my favourite honeys there. And now we've got all sorts of other things kicking in. Here on the coast we expect a bit of a wane soon. All those flowers will have done their dash, and there'll be a bit of a drop off for a while. But it's a lovely time of year, lots of fast action, good time to be beekeeping.
So Scott's question is, he says, before I added the flow frames, half the hive was honey, while the other half was brood. I assume the bees will start putting brood into those comb and start the honey in the frames over time? Yes,
the bees move honey around the hive all the time. They're quite adept at that, and they do it just as a matter of fact to de-water it. So if it's not capped yet, they move it very quickly. If it is capped, they let it hang there a bit longer, but if they need that space, they'll uncap, take out that honey, and make room for new brood. So they will just move the honey stores upstairs as they need that space. It's not a big issue for them. So yeah, keep those questions coming in. We're just having a little technical difficulty here, so I'll just pull out that brood frame again and see how the girls are going, fixing that up. And you can see them licking up that nectar, and really hopefully starting a nice straight comb along here where we've adjusted their naturally drawn comb. Sometimes you can strategically move one of these edge frames around if you want them to fatten it up on one side or the other, but bearing in mind you want to make sure all the comb's nice and serviceable for the bees.
Misty would like to know, when she harvests for the first time, should she wait until all the flow frames are full of honey, as 2 of her middle frames are nearly full? But if she harvests them, will they just keep filling the middle frames and not the outside ones?
If you've got a good nectar flow on and you can see it coming in as a real building, then go for it, harvest some honey. It's a really enjoyable experience to see that come out. So if you see nice cap frames in the middle, harvest yourself some honey. If you're really unsure, the flow frames do allow you just to take part of a frame, so you might just put the key in a little way and take out half a frame if you like, and in doing so leaving the honey for the bees if you think that possibly there might not be so many flowers producing nectar coming up. So it really depends on what's ahead.
Amy said the bees are so calm. What type are they?
So these ones look like Italian bees. So Italian bees have the more gold kind of colour to them, and the Caucasians are dark all the way through. So Italian bees are a good friendly bee, usually if the genetics have been selected that way by a bee breeder. This was a swarm we caught, and we might have just got luck of the draw here in terms of, I don't think this was a genetics we purchased in for the hive it came from, but bees do vary a lot. If you've got really aggressive genetics, then it might pay to get a new queen. It's a bit of a process, swapping the queen over, so you may like to get help doing that by someone experienced.
Stephen's just about to receive a batch of bees. He's wondering, does he need to have a feeder to help get them started?
That depends a lot on your location. If there's nothing they can forage on, then feed your bees or they'll starve. But here we don't need to feed the bees ever really, because we've got nectar coming in at, most of the year round actually. So it really is location specific, and that question might be a good one for our honeyflow.com forum or to some local experienced beekeepers.
Kyle's wondering, how often should he check the frames?
Okay, if you're going for the foundationless frames, then you do need to check a bit more often until they've fully drawn the combs out. That way you have a chance to straighten them up if they're going wonky, which a stitch in time will save 9 in that foundationless frame drawing out. So basically from there, that will also depend on your local conditions. For us here, once the beehive is established and going well, commercial beekeepers tend to do a full brood inspection a couple of times a year, or when needed if the numbers of the hive are dropping. Other continents, you've got things like the Varroa destructor, which needs a lot more attention. So the answer will come from your local experienced beekeepers as to how often you'll need to do that brood inspection.
Shelley's wondering, is the height of the hive important?
Here, the reason why we put the hives up a little bit off the ground is because at night time the cane toads come and eat them. So we've got this introduced pest called the cane toad here in Australia that'll bang on the hive at night, and as the bees come out to see what's going on, they'll eat them up. So if you get your hive a bit off the ground, then you get a lot less, cane toads can only get fallen bees. So that's the reason why all the hives you'll see up a little bit. In other places you've got skunks and all sorts of pests that it's a good idea to keep the hive up off the ground from. So we've got one more question, and
Martin's asking, if I have no flowers around, would it take longer to produce the brood and supernaturally, and if so, how long would it take to then get honey?
Okay, great question. Now, like any kind of agriculture, the weather, the climate, what's going on really affects your production. So on a good season, things might be going great. You can harvest your whole hive multiple times and get an incredible amount of honey. On a poor season, you may not get any honey at all. So that's the scope. In a poor season, where some parts of Australia are in a real drought state, where the rain means no flowers, which means no nectar for the bees, which means that in some places they're having to feed the bees just to get them to survive. So in that situation, you won't get any honey production, and you'll need to wait for the weather to improve. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to give us some ideas of what to cover next week, put them in the comments below, and hopefully we can do another great live broadcast with something interesting to show you.